One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. And I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. Tonight is April 18th, 2012, one night before the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, I wanted to spend the 2 hours tonight going over the Oklahoma City bombing, and I could have sat here and just blabbed to you guys, perhaps maybe played an audio clip here or there from a film or two. But rather than do that, I decided to do something a little better. And tonight, I was able to get two of my friends, two men you've heard before on the show, two filmmakers, two members of the team, I should say, that created this film, A Noble Lie. I want to welcome back to the show James Lane and Holland Vandennieuwenhof. Welcome back.
Popeye, thank you for having us on. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I was excited actually back on your show, Popeye. You were in a great outfit here.
Yeah, we had a great time last time. I mean, we covered a lot of information that we're not normally able to cover on other shows, man. You really covered the spectrum.
Well, feel free to be, open and speak your mind about whatever you want. You know, if there's something that you guys didn't get a chance to speak about on any of your interviews today, because, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, these guys are like supermen. They've been doing interviews all day because tomorrow is obviously the anniversary of the bombing, and your film is pretty much the quintessential film out there now about what happened. I have a lot of new listeners now, so let's get right into it a little bit. Either one of you guys could decide which one of you wants to start, but go ahead and give the listeners a little bit of information about the bombing and what you've uncovered so far and why your film is so important.
For those of you interested, of course, you can go to anoblelie.com. But I guess I should start out with the official story because a lot of younger people may not be especially familiar with the story, especially if they didn't live through it and see it on the news. 17 years ago tomorrow, April 19th, 1995, the federal building in Oklahoma City was bombed. It was blamed upon Timothy McVey, a person who drove a Ryder truck in front of the Murrah building and left it there to explode as revenge for Waco, which had ended in a catastrophic fire 2 years to the day before the bombing. The extent of the conspiracy, according to the federal government, was Tim McVey, another Army buddy of his named Terry Nichols, who helped him construct the bomb in Kansas, and only one other person in the universe knew of this plot, another Army buddy named Michael Fortier, who served a 10-year sentence and disappeared in the Witness Protection Program. Terry Nichols is in jail for the rest of his life, and Tim McVey was executed on June 6th of 2001.
Well, and, several years ago, we founded We Are Change Oklahoma, and a mutual friend introduced me to Holland, Vandennieuwenhof, and Chris Emery. And I realized that I had in the midst of our organization probably the world's foremost experts on the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, these guys are walking encyclopedias. In combination with Wendy Painting and her research in her doctoral thesis on the Oklahoma City bombing, we really had all the elements that we needed to put a cohesive story together, encapsulated in one 2-hour format that we could take to people and show them, even the uninitiated. This is a methodology that we have experienced in our street activism, where, those one-on-one conversations, which ones produce the best results. And I think that Manny Badillo had probably one of the most effective methodologies, where you bring the victim's family members in and you gain the emotional credibility. Then you bring in the technical experts and you get the technical credibility. And at that point, you're nobody can really go against you without some sort of emotional response. And we've shown this documentary to many skeptics that said that they showed up expecting a conspiracy movie, and when they walk away, they say that was an expose. We don't lead anybody to conclusions. We only present documented evidence and eyewitness testimony, and we lead we allow the viewer to use their own intelligence to discern for themselves what is truthful and what is not. And this has been a very effective methodology in bringing the uninitiated into the methodology of the falsified terror attack.
And you guys have had some good feedback from the movie. Like, people are, obviously the movie's waking people up. I know it has, but like, on your end, have you had people, emailing you and saying, "Oh my God, this opened my eyes"?
Well, the Oklahoma City bombing is that case is such a demonstrable case of the official story being utterly false from top to bottom, and so easy to disprove. And when you realize the magnitude of that lie, when people realize for a fact that their government is capable of committing this kind of cover-up on this kind of atrocity, contrary to every kind of program we've been given our entire life, people can realize that this kind of government can lie, cheat, and steal about anything. So it is a wake-up tool, and it's also a way to rob the ruling class of their, or whatever you want to call them, of their false flag terror tool, exposing it and exposing its machinations. So if they try it again, people will wake up immediately. You have to remember that the Oklahoma City bombing happened in 1995 in the infancy of the internet, and certainly the dissemination of information wasn't not even a percentile of what it is today. If they tried something as sloppy as Oklahoma City again right now, I think it would blow up in their face immediately. Hopefully, we are learning faster than they can learn to cover things up.
Well, and we took what would have been a 10-hour documentary and boiled it down to the most provable essence, and that's what got it down to 2 hours. And I think that when we look at people like Kurt Haskell, who saw the underwear bomber, who had questions about the official story of 9/11 and said he was determined not to allow a cover-up to happen in that event, we see how exposing the methodology of state terror actually saves lives. And I think that we are actually taking the tool of the false flag terror attack out of the toolbox of the global oligarchy. And this is truly saving lives. That's why when you go to ennoblelie.com, you get the documentary. You can show this to your friends and family, and it's presented in such a way that the uninitiated, it's palatable to them, and they're able to watch it and, again, discern for themselves what's factual.
I got to say, before I had seen your movie, the only other movie I'd seen, there was a YouTube link I remember you had sent me a long time ago, James, that I had watched. You guys might have even put it together, or somebody in We Are Change Oklahoma might have put it together. It was a movie about, it was kind of like, you could tell it wasn't, super professionally, funded or anything like that. But it brought a lot of evidence about a lot of the stuff that I had never seen before. And besides that, I'd only seen that other one. What is it called? Murder in the Heartland. So there's really no other good films out there. I mean, Murder in the Heartland's great, but you guys knocked it out of the friggin' park.
Well, that was Pat Shannon, and that was done during the 90s. And you also had State Representative Charles Key, who did What Really Happened. in regards to the Oklahoma City bombing, again, in the 90s. There hasn't been anything done in this century that actually encapsulated the entire story in a way that was understandable and be able to see the big picture, you know. And that was our goal here, was to spur new investigation. There are so many people that investigate the incident of 9/11, but there's no real investigation about the Oklahoma City bombing beyond what, this small group of people have done. We wanted to present this to the world and spur people to do their own research and actually, bring new information to light. We hope to encourage folks with what we have done here and actually, get them involved in this cover-up, because it is so easy to expose. It's so easy to poke holes through the official story, much more so than any other false flag that I've ever seen. And I think it's a shame that there's not more information out there about it. That's why we had to do this.
It is an amazing film. I'm going to cut you guys off right there. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. 3 minutes. We'll be right back. Break time is fast. You know how my show goes. The blink of an eye. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
What you did that day, kill your own citizens to advance your ways. All my real patriots stand up and say 9/11.
The Oklahoma City bombing was an inside job. I hate that term inside job, though, because it's so it just sounds prepackaged, like it's you stamp it out and send it out for shipping.
It's not neutral anymore. It's taken on a life of its own.
Well, and when we were in New York 2 years ago, Michael Walters had actually done the T-shirts for We Are Changed for the street action, and it just said "Defend the Republic." And I had many people, New Yorkers, just come up to me and said, "That's the best T-shirt you guys ever had." The inside job idea, I think, while it is palatable to those of us that understand the bigger picture, the people that don't understand it, it's offensive to them. And just something as simple as "Defend the Republic" was very well received.
I agree, and I catch myself, like I have a bumper sticker that says 9/11 was an inside job. I like to, whatever. It's been a way.
You like to get pulled over?
Yeah, right. I've always had usually positive. The only interaction I ever had was positive from truckers, people driving by, honking, giving me a thumbs up. Actually, I had a lady drive up to me, and because I have my military tags down here in Florida, you can get different military tags. So I have my old service tags on the back of my vehicle, and she pulls up and she sees the sticker, and she proceeds to yell at me on the highway how I should be ashamed of myself because of who I am, that I have the bumper sticker. So I gave her instead of yelling back at her, I really pissed her off. I just looked at her, smiled, and gave her the Miss America wave. Dude, she freaked out. It was great. But yeah, that's the only negative attention I've ever had from it.
Well, and that's one thing that we see in the street actions. I think a lot of the new people that show up expect to have confrontations. And I have to say that the vast majority, maybe as much as 98, 99% of the people that we talk to at the Oklahoma City Bombing Memorial are very open to discussing the questions, because, most people in Oklahoma have questions about what happened. It's been very rare that we ever encounter anybody that's negative, and it's really light. And to that point, tomorrow at 8 a.m. at the Oklahoma City Bombing Memorial here in Oklahoma City, we will be doing a major street action with We Are Change Oklahoma. We're going to be handing out 500 free copies of the documentary A Noble Lie to all of the people that are present at the memorial ceremony, getting the earful of the official story. We're going to be there, giving the truth to the people that have been lied to for so long. And, anybody that is within driving range, everybody is welcome. You can come out and you can talk to people, or you can not. Just simply hand out DVDs, or you can get on those one-on-one conversations and change minds, whatever you're comfortable with, but everybody is welcome.
So you guys are actually handing out copies. What did you say, 500 copies of the movie?
500 copies of the movie.
That's amazing.
Pocket. Yes, we're just, to us, that was our whole goal in this movie.
That's a lot of copies, by the way, just in case anybody is not sure, for like a street action. That's a lot.
Well, obviously we wanted to break even. Most of this documentary was produced out of our own pocket, and we've done it at this point, and we just want to kind of give back. It's about getting the message out to the people and countering the official narrative. We see the institutionalization of the lie here in Oklahoma, while the same year that the legislation was trying to be passed to teach the Constitution and the compulsory schooling in Oklahoma that was struck down, they passed the legislation that said the official story of Oklahoma bombing would be taught in the public schools. And when I was in New York last year, I had my We Are Change Oklahoma shirt on, and I had a guy come up. He's like, "Oh, Oklahoma." He goes, "I'm from the bombing memorial." "Really? What are you doing here?" And he says, "Well, I'm here to teach these guys how to do what we're doing in Oklahoma City." And we see the same legislation passed in New York City to teach the official story of 9/11 to the compulsory schooling there. It's about the institutionalization of the lie, and it's up to us to counter that. I mean, if we're not, nobody else will.
Well, you guys did an amazing job with your movie. Let's get into some of the evidence that you guys have brought to light. In your eyes, what do you consider to be the biggest key piece of evidence? I guess the smoking gun, if you want to, put quotes on something or a label. What would be the biggest piece of evidence that you guys have brought to light?
Well, despite the large amount of eyewitness accounts and the questioning of the official story, much of which can be, if you're skeptical-minded, written off the various causes, one cannot deny the science. And what is a fact and what cannot be denied is that the official story for the damage to the Murrah building is utterly false. The official story is that at first 1,200 pounds of ammonium nitrate in fuel oil, called an ANFO mixture, was responsible for the damage. That later evolved into 4,800 pounds and later 7,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate, fertilizer, diesel fuel, and nitromethane racing fuel as a booster. The problem with that is that 7,000 pounds just exceeds the weight capacity of that Ryder truck, but never mind that. The fact is that the crater in the street was about half as large as they were portraying in the media and in the FEMA report. We document in the movie the fact that the crater is no more than 16 foot wide and 4 feet deep. And that crater is offset from the major damage to the Murrah building. There are columns closer to the crater, completely intact, with the sheetrock hanging off, but columns farther away completely dissolved. The floors pancaked upon one another and were responsible for the bulk of the casualties. Many people, many first responders commented on this. In the movie, we interview General Benton K. Parton. He was the former chief of weapons development for the Air Force. He was instrumental in the development of the Smart Bomb. He spent his career blowing things up and doing bomb damage analysis for the military. He did a bomb damage analysis at Oklahoma City. He came here and rendered a conclusion in the Parton report. And anyone can Google Parton with an I, P-A-R-T-I-N, Parton report, and read it. And it concludes, and it shows the reasons, that 4 interior bombs strapped to supporting columns were responsible for the damage. Later on, the Air Force themselves conducted a simulation of the Oklahoma City bombing at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. The Wright Armament Laboratory, they had a 3-story mock-up building, a test structure. It had no roof, had no support columns, just a test structure. And they constructed the bomb the way that the FBI said it was, with a dozen 55-gallon barrels connected with deck cord. What they found was that each barrel actually acted as a separate bomb, and that most of the explosion was they canceled each other out, and whatever was left shot straight up into the air. It did almost nothing to their test structure. So they decided to make a single, more powerful bomb, the same weight, but a single package. So it's much more powerful than what they say was used in Oklahoma City. And they exploded it at the prescribed distance from the test structure. What they found was this more powerful bomb did less damage to their very flimsy test structure than what we see at Oklahoma City. And the conclusion of the Wright Armament Laboratory, Air Force engineers working out of Eglin Air Force Base, their conclusion was that there were bombs inside the building. So you have one branch of government, the Air Force in this case, saying that there were bombs inside the building. This cannot be denied. Yet the spokesman for the government insists that the truck bomb was the sole cause of destruction. We can back this up with the seismograph evidence. 3 seismographs in OU recorded 2 different explosions, 8 to 10 seconds apart, and it's the official position of the Oklahoma Geological Survey that these represent 2 energetic events unrelated to air blast or debris falling on the ground. Up to 14 eyewitnesses have confirmed, have reported. We interview 2 of them and show a clip of another, a news clip of the day of, that the building was shaking and coming apart before the exterior truck bomb went off, that the floors and the ceilings were collapsing, and then a sizable amount of time later, 8 to 10 seconds usually described, the windows came crashing in and the floor collapsed. So obviously, there were interior bombs and the truck bomb was merely a prop.
And when you have all these people that are saying that they thought it was an earthquake, they had 8 to 10 seconds to get under their desk before the glass blew in. This is in contradiction to the FEMA report that says the blast wave was traveling at 1,700 feet per second. Now, you tell me how somebody has the time to think that that's an earthquake and get under the desk. It doesn't make sense.
I'm going to have to cut you guys off because of the breaks coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to contemplate what James and Holland just said. Think about what they just said, and we're going to get back into the evidence when we come back. Don't go anywhere. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to get right back into it because James was talking and he got cut off by the break. So, James, go ahead.
Well, we were talking about the additional ordinance inside the building, and I think that there's a few more incidents that we need to discuss. One is Dr. Samuel Cohen. He was the inventor of the neutron bomb, and he is on record saying that it would be against the laws of nature, no matter how much ammonium nitrate and fuel oil was used to actually create the damage that was seen at the Oklahoma City bombing. In addition...
We actually consulted with Sam Cohen a little during the course of making of this movie, and it was pretty interesting to be on the phone with the inventor of the neutron bomb because he was an early supporter of the findings of the bombing commission, and he knew that that Anfo bomb could not have done that damage to that building. He actually passed away during production, so that's one reason we included his quote. And so, and I'm also especially a fan of the movie Repo Man.
Yeah.
And so I asked asked Sam Cohen if he liked his own portrayal in Repo Man, and he started laughing.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that movie a long time ago. It was interesting talking to that guy. But yeah, I mean, for him to actually go on the record, with his, his credibility, I think that was amazing. And then beyond that, they say that the, truck bomb was composed of ammonium nitrate and fuel oil, which is called ANFO. And the hallmark of an ANFO bomb is an ammonium nitrate gas cloud, be it at Sterling Hall almost 41 years ago this next August, where 26 first responders were hospitalized from the inhalation of nitric gas, or the numerous ANFO bombs that were, set off by the Irish IRA. All those first responders are always hospitalized. And you don't have an ANFO bomb without a nitric gas cloud. We did not see that in Oklahoma City. And that's evident by the story of Terence Yeakey. Terence Yeakey was a police officer that was on the scene within minutes of the explosion. Tom Hall, one of the first people that he pulled out of the building, saving 7 other people's lives that day. I mean, he was a true hero. He had no problem with respiration. We've talked to the other survivors. When they get down to the ground floor, again, they're walking, no problem with respiration. This calls into question what was actually in the truck bomb. I mean, there's no doubt there was a truck bomb, but what was the explosive that was in there? And I don't think that there's any evidence that it was actually an ANFO. We get in a little bit into Terence Yeakey with this. His story is very interesting because he saw things that day that called into question the official story. I mean, he saw federal agents on the scene within minutes of the bombing. He was on record with his family saying that when the official story was being told, he's almost in tears saying that's not the way it happened. But he wanted to protect his family, and so, he did keep a lot back from them. The last that was heard of him, he was on his way to meet a friend for a meal, and he called him and said, I've got some people following me, and after I shake them, I'm going to drop this stuff off at mini storage, and I'll meet you for our meal. He never made it. The official story says that he cut his wrists in his car, cut his neck, and then there are rope marks on his neck, including handcuff marks on his wrists. So apparently he dragged himself a mile away after he had the initial injuries, and then shot himself with a small caliber weapon at a downward angle through the top of his skull, coming out of his jaw at far enough distance to not create a powder burn on his skull. When the sheriff's department arrives, they're on record saying that there were 2 boxes of documents in his vehicle, and they were unable to find the weapon that caused his death. This was federal property, so when the FBI arrives, within minutes of them arriving, they miraculously find the weapon. The documents come up missing whenever the vehicle goes into the impound lot, and his death is declared a suicide. His family said that he had everything to live for. He had just reconciled with his wife. He'd got the key to the city. He got Police Officer of the Year. I mean, all of these awards. He was the happiest, he'd been in a long time and had no comments to them about any type of suicide. When they questioned the official details of the story, they're told that they're paranoid and they watch too much television. No autopsy was done. Every officer that has died in Oklahoma City, be it just in a minor car wreck or whatever, he gets an autopsy. They go beyond that to actually smear him and say that, he was high on drugs or alcohol. His blood test actually showed that he was not. So, I mean, this man was treated horribly, and he was a hero that day. And, I think that it was a message to the other people that saw things to keep quiet. I mean, beyond that, Officer Don Browning was asking questions, and he was told straight up by a FBI agent that people like him that ask questions, them and their wife usually end up dead. And he said the way it was presented to him, it was a threat. This is the type of intimidation that occurred when people had the audacity to try to actually seek the truth in the Oklahoma City bombing.
It's disgusting. And Yeakey was a hero. I mean, if you want to talk about a real hero, that guy was a hero, not some of these false stories that you hear about. Wasn't he able to say that he saw the ATF there and they were all, there was a lot of them had no damage, oh, I'm hurt, but there really wasn't any injuries?
Well, when he showed up at the scene, there were actually FBI agents and other federal agents there who shouldn't have been there. The FBI headquarters was a good number of miles away. They shouldn't have been waiting outside the building watching what was going down. They certainly weren't taking part in the rescue effort. Terry Yeakey was the first officer on the scene, so he saw the initial appearance of the scene. He knew exactly what was going on, and he was noting it because he was known for writing meticulous reports. In fact, when he turned in his first report, they confiscated it and told him to write another one, only a page and a half instead of 17 pages. And he wanted a copy of his old report back, and they wouldn't give it to him. And he was also a pillar of the community. I mean, he received the keys to the city. He was getting ready to receive the Medal of Valor. I personally believe he was actually going to resign the department because he was just tired of the harassment. And he was moving on to Dallas. And he was getting ready to receive the Medal of Valor. And I don't think they wanted him to give that speech. Because he had nothing to lose. He was leaving the department. He was going to have the media pointing their cameras at him. And they wouldn't be able to deny anything or ignore anything he said. He could not be allowed to give that speech. But, he was a pillar of the community. I've talked to children who knew him. He was the DARE officer. He went to classrooms talking to kids about drug use. And they loved him. I mean, he was a big teddy bear of a man. One of the largest officers on the department, but he had a heart of gold. And I've talked to children, actually adults now who were children back then who remembered him. And his death affected them greatly when they were told that their hero had just killed themselves. I mean, they knew him as the hero of Oklahoma City, the guy who came to their classroom and kidded and palled around with them and taught them the right things to do. And they killed this man because he did the right thing.
And an interesting change of events here in Oklahoma in the last year, legislation was passed that says that if your family member's death was declared a suicide, you can actually contest that now. And so we're hoping to utilize that legislation to bring about a new investigation of Terence Yeakey's death and maybe get an actual autopsy on him. Anybody that wants to support that, they can go to tytruth.com and get the whole story and try to get behind us in this because again, the man was a hero. He deserves better.
And once we get done with the anniversary and stuff, we're going to start really concentrating on that effort, and we'll be promoting that, and we'll be back on your show, hopefully, to talk about it.
Yeah, I want to make sure we definitely promote that because I want to be able to I really, really would love to be able to help somehow get justice for this guy's killers because we know that he didn't kill himself. Come on.
I've been told by cops themselves. I mean, I was at an event handing out literature and, doing a street action, and two cops walk up to me, and they saw I was passing out information about Oklahoma City, and they're like, that cop that got killed out in El Reno? I was like, yeah. Like, yeah, I think they did him in. I was like, no kidding. Because it was a message to all the first responders, keep your mouth shut. And when they told Don Browning that you might end up dead, that was not an idle threat.
Oh, that was definitely a message.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's a big dude.
Oh, yeah.
So if they take out the big guy, then anybody else, anybody else that might have looked up to him, like you said, might now be like, wow, if they got him, they can get any of us.
That's a good point.
And they'd be more inclined to keep their mouth shut.
Mm-hmm. Well, he may have fought to his death. There was, I believe, another blood type in the car besides his own, so he did put up a fight.
Oh, it's just so... You know, when people say to me they would never do this, it's like, dude, are you kidding me? Popeye, they're FBI agents. That doesn't matter. You think every FBI agent's a good guy? Remember, if they're the ones doing the psych tests, if they know they let in certain people that are a little maybe more psychopathic than others, they'll let them in, and they'll have somebody, and they'll say, come here, we need to talk to you. You know, maybe the person who did it, if the guy's an agent, maybe he just happens to be related to somebody, you know what I mean? That's another way they do things. Cousins, uncles, whatever. All right, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Last segment coming up in the first hour, and then we got another hour. Don't go anywhere. Go check out the website, anoblelie.com, anoblelie.com. Buy the movie, support the film, and support James, Holland, and the rest of the group. They did a hell of a job. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. And during the break, James was about to give me some breaking news, and I literally had to cut him off because we were coming back in. So what he's about to say, I haven't heard either. So go ahead, James.
Well, strangely enough, we were talking about a gentleman that we'll probably get into a little more as we get into the interview. His name is Andreas Strassmeir. He's one of those individuals that is a thread that plays throughout the entire story. We were on the InfoWars Nightly News tonight with one of the survivors, Jane Graham, and she started describing the scene that she saw in the basement on the Friday prior to the bombing, which was on a Wednesday. And she's one of those folks that likes to get into, minute detail. But as many times as we've talked to her, she never described the vehicle that was parked in the reserved parking space, which made her initially interested in these people that were in the basement.
Well, I mean, that's not entirely her fault. I guess I never did ask her the make of the vehicle.
No, but she starts talking about the make of the vehicle tonight. And what's interesting about it is that is identical. Yeah,
she actually identified Andy Strassmeir, the person, in the parking garage a couple days before the bombing with two other men she described as military with haircuts, very muscular build. And she picked Andy Strassmeir out of a police lineup. A police officer showed her a lineup, but she picked out this Andy Strassmeir guy. And she just casually mentioned today that the vehicle that they had the plans of the Murrah building laid out on with sacks of plastic explosives, she didn't recognize it at the time. She thought it was like gray putty. It was connected by wires. And when she started looking at it, they shoved it back in the sack. I mean, she was a civilian. She had no idea what explosives looked like. It was until after the bombing she put two and two together.
She thought they were GSA workers working on the telephone because she saw wires and putty. But, I mean, this is the exact same way that you set up det cord with C4. Demolitions experts have listened to what she says, and then she said that is the way you set up explosives.
And we know C4 was actually used in the building. I mean, there's a variety of reasons I can go into on that. But for this, she casually mentions that the vehicle that they had the plans of the Murrah building laid out on was a old station wagon with wood panels. I was like,
covered in dirt.
I was like, you got to be kidding me. That was Andy Strassmeir's car. In fact, that was the same car he was pulled over in and got towed away because he didn't have a license plate on it or something. And that was one of the weird things about Andy Strassmeir is that this tow truck driver in eastern Oklahoma, he tows this truck and he starts getting phone calls. He described it as a general from Fort Bragg, as he started getting calls from the governor's office, someone in the State Department, all telling him to release that vehicle. He hadn't dealt with nothing like that in his life, just this broken down old wrecker. And he's been getting these calls from all over D.C. and the military-industrial complex telling him to release this clunker. So, I mean, he brought that up to the bombing commission.
Yeah, Jane recognized him later on. I mean, this was months after the bombing, and she was watching some videos with VZ Lawton, another survivor. And she said, this is the guy that I saw in the basement. I thought they were GSA workers.
Go ahead.
And so identified him months after the fact. I mean, she didn't even realize at the time what she was seeing. She was just suspicious of them because they were actually parked in one of the reserved spots, and she's like, well, they shouldn't be there and that type of thing.
That's an important fact, that most people have no idea because, remember, the official story is truck bomb, boom, that's it. Most people don't realize that there's a witness that actually saw somebody, or actually a few people with what she like you said, she said gray putty or whatever, and wires, which obviously is C4, and nobody knows that. This is like this is one of those facts that it amazes me that nobody knows this, because this is like, again, a smoking gun. You know, if anybody wants to think that they took the building down, well, Popeye, how would they have done it? You're saying it wasn't a truck bomb? No, I'm saying they planted explosives in the building. Well, how could they have done that? Well, there were witnesses. I've never heard of that. You know what I mean? This is one of those things that it's like, boom, big red arrow.
Right, and one of the interesting things about Strassmeir, like I said, he's one of those individuals that ties the entire story together. No matter where Timothy McVey was seen, be it Lady Godiva's strip club in the Tulsa area, so he was seen with Andreas Strassmeir. We have Josiah Stone, a member of the white separatist compound Elohim City, where Andreas Strassmeir was the head of security. He actually saw Timothy McVey there with him at that time. Carol Howe, ATF informant, said that she saw, or she was with Andreas Strassmeir while they were scouting locations for a bombing, to the point where she actually told her friends, don't be around a federal building in April. They tried to discredit all of these people that saw him, and then immediately after the Oklahoma City bombing, he's
a spook, right?
Yeah, well,
yeah,
his parents are, and yeah,
he worked in West German intelligence by his own admission and according to his own record. Yeah.
And he got thrown out of Texas because the Texas militia saw him accessing a federal building through a key code at the door, and so he had to leave there, and he went up to Elohim City. You know, so I mean, this guy has a long history, and his attorney, Kirk Lyons, actually helped him get out of the country immediately after the Oklahoma City bombing through Mexico. And the extent of the FBI's investigation was a single phone call to him saying, did you do it? No. Okay, thank you. You know, I mean, it's beyond absurd. And how this guy has managed to maintain this as long as he has is beyond me. I mean, we actually caught some heat from Kirk Lyons for talking about what we did. But every time we confronted him on it, we said, well, we named off all these witnesses. He go, oh, not credible, not credible, not credible. It's like, okay, well, let Andy tell his story, and we've yet to hear from him.
So he's still alive?
Oh, he's alive and in Germany, according to his attorney. And also Andy Strassmeir, and I will say this for the record, was a government informant. The FBI teletypes have come out where they're using Andy Strassmeir as a source of information through the SPLC, and that there is more information coming out on Strassmeir this month. A book coming out called Oklahoma City, What the Investigation Missed and Why It Matters, by Andrew Gumbel and Roger Charles. Roger Charles had been the ABC producer who made a 15-minute segment for 2020 on evidence of prior knowledge by the ATF. That segment was so popular that he produced a whole hour on evidence in Oklahoma City for 2020. Produced it, shot it, sitting in at home TV, waiting for it to come on, and they played a rerun. He calls his bosses at ABC. He's like, hey, what's up? And like, well, we got some phone calls from the Justice Department, and we agreed to drop the show. I mean, this is after they've already shot the entire thing and produced it. Roger Charles became so upset that he quit and started working for the Bombing Commission. And he's coming out with a book this month. And from what I understand, it has some startling revelations about Andy Strassmeir. He's been able to talk to retired federal and CIA agents who are now willing to talk about what they were involved with now that they're off the clock and they don't have to worry about their pensions or their benefits or their career or anything. So this story is still alive and still bleeding information that's coming out. In fact, an article came out today by J.M. Berger of the Intel Wire on PACCON, Operation PACCON, Patriot Conspiracy, which was a federal effort to infiltrate every right-wing, so-called right-wing group in the country and implicated them in explosives and federal firearms felonies. And we believe for a number of reasons that Oklahoma City was spawned out of PACCON. And in fact, the day we released the movie, this is kind of strange enough, December 9th, Newsweek released an article that was supposed to be on PACCON. In fact, Jesse Trentadue, whom we interview in the movie, was read the article word for word the weekend before it was released by the writer who wrote it, who we talked to, and he's seen the movie actually, and he likes it. But the story was cut by Newsweek editor Tina Brown, cut all references to Andy Strassmeir, to PACCON were cut out of the article, and it was released in its censored form, having no mention of this. So they're still very sensitive about PACCON, and this story is still very much alive.
Well, that's why it's still important. You know, people say, why 17 years on do you still try to, understand this? Let it go. No, I mean, we're still finding out. Like I said, we just uncovered new information tonight in the middle of an interview. This is still ongoing. We hope the listeners out there will go out and get, the documentary, get a copy of the final report, which was the culmination of all of the Oklahoma Bombing Investigation Committee's research. Understand this and to do your own research. I mean, there's a giant body of evidence out there, giant body of research out there on the events of 9/11, but we don't see that in Oklahoma City. And Oklahoma City is so much easier to tear apart. The official story is so much weaker. We want to spur new researchers. Get out there, get involved, because when you uncover the methodology that's behind these events, you actually save lives. This is exposing false flag terror. This is taking away their major tool. And we are way past due right now.
Well, you guys just gave us a major weapon in the info war, because for real, there was never, again, I think you put it best earlier, in this century, we haven't had a good movie about Oklahoma City, because Pat's movie was made back, in maybe the mid to late, the bombing happened in 95, so somewhere between 95 and 2000 that movie was made,
Well, and so much more evidence has come out, We were able to encapsulate so many different researchers' efforts in this. Like I said, Wendy Painting, Chris Emery, Holland, we've got Jesse Trinidad, we've got J.D. Cash, we've got all of these people that have been doing this research for so long, and be able to put it all together in one spot. That was, I think that's what this event needed in order to spur research.
Well, I hope that people are they're inspired by your work and what you guys have done, and they take it a step further and they start researching things, because that's how 9/11 got so. That's how I guess you could say, quote unquote, 9/11 truth got so big, and that's how so much information has come out, because there are people that still do tons of good research on that. So we should do the same thing and set our sights on Oklahoma City. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hour number 1 flew by, as it always does. But relax, calm yourself, don't go anywhere. Hour number 2 coming up. Stay with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 on tonight's edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. Tonight is April 18th, 2012. It is one day before the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. And the first hour, I believe that Holland, James, and myself have pretty much given you some new information that I don't think anybody has heard before tonight. You guys just broke something on in the InfoWars Nightly News, and then were kind enough to bring it over here. And it's amazing, isn't it? By the way, the synchronicity of things, as you keep looking into this further and further, the more things just start to fall into place like puzzle pieces. It's just, it blows my mind. And I want to bring up what James mentioned in the final segment of the first hour. And then we're going to move on to a few other things. But James made a good point. You guys need to, and when I say you guys, I mean the listeners, ladies, gentlemen, everybody out there listening, I need you all to look at what Holland, James, Chris, and the rest of their crew put together and run with it. And do your own research and start to, if you want to make your own film, try to get in touch with these people if you can. Some of them are probably not going to be around anymore. Whoever you can get in touch with, any survivors that are still around, anybody that's willing to talk to you. If you're if you're really going to do something and really make an effort about it, do it. Go out and make a film that's even more in-depth. I challenge you to step up to the plate and try to make something that's even more in-depth than these guys did. I don't think you'll be able to do so, but at least it'll, give you the drive to do it. And I want you to be inspired by what they've done. And that's why I promote the hell out of them, because they paid for all of this stuff out of their own pocket. And these guys are, I talk to them off air. I'm proud to consider these guys friends. And these guys are just totally awesome individuals as humans. So make sure you support them.
Well, here's the thing, Popeye. I mean, all we did was like start a We Are Change chapter, right? You know, I mean, we were just activists out there in the streets talking to people, and we're looking around and we're like, where is the material on the Oklahoma City bombing? It doesn't exist. You know, I didn't know how to make movies before I got into this, but it was just a determination. I found the people that did know how to make it. I found the researchers. I found the director of photography. I found the editor. You know, and we put the crew together. Anybody could do this. I mean, if I can do it, anybody can.
You did something. That's the difference, James. You stood up and said, this is BS. I'm not going to tolerate this. And you did something about it.
But if I can do it, anybody can do it is what I'm saying.
Oh, I agree. That's why I hope you're an inspiration to others. Which I believe you are. You know what I mean? You inspire me. Honestly, I didn't know as much as I know about Oklahoma City. I mean, I had researched it and stuff, but there was things that I really didn't know. I knew a little bit about Strassmeir, but I know a lot more about him now because of your movie. For real. I mean, that's not blowing smoke. That's the God's honest truth. There's a lot of stuff that you guys brought to light. So I hope that, again, people take what you guys did and they, I hope they're challenged by it and they say, well, maybe I can do something better. Then go ahead.
Exactly. It takes a tenacity and say that I'm going to spend my time fighting the enemy. I'm going to do whatever I can each day to preserve and expand individual liberty and not infight and not, point fingers at this person or that person, what they could do better. You know what? If you can do better, then you go out and do it. Please, let's make it a competition. Let's try to outdo one another as far as bringing truth to the public.
I agree. Channel that anger if they have like, well, no, you forgot to add this. Or people always want to criticize. Well, you know what? Look, if you feel these guys left something out or didn't do something or didn't add something that they should have, then go out and make your own addendum to it or something, or your own version of a documentary about Oklahoma City. Nothing is stopping anybody. And for the people out there that aren't haters and are inspired, again, I challenge you to try to make something better. And we have to do with Oklahoma City what we've done with 9/11, and we still have to kick it up a notch with 9/11 too, because 9/11 Truth is kind of stalled in the water a little bit right now. It's kind of lost its steam a bit. You guys have a tour going on right now about the film, correct?
Yes, our narrator, Chris Emery, is on somewhat of a Midwestern screening tour right now. Tuesday night, he was in Elmhurst, Illinois. Tonight, he was showing in Milwaukee. Tomorrow night, the night of the anniversary, our narrator, Chris Emery, will be at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And at 7 o'clock, hosting a screening of the movie, A Noble Lie, and he'll be there, of course, for Q&A. It's the local We Are Change chapters who are doing a lot of the support, networking, and setting up these venues. So we, of course, thank We Are Change chapters who are assisting us for that. So tomorrow night, on the night of the anniversary, he'll be at the University of Wisconsin. Of course, you can find this on our website. And Friday on 4/20, he'll be at the Uptown Theater in Kansas City, Missouri, and then he's coming back to Oklahoma. So the next two nights, if you're in around University of Wisconsin or Madison or Kansas City, Missouri, you can check out a screening of the movie, meet Chris Emery in person, ask your own questions, and bring friends and family. It'll be on the big screen. So that's coming up soon. We're also having, James and I will be on Coast to Coast this Saturday with John Wells, the weekend edition. So that's going to be a tremendous boost in exposure for the movie.
In addition, we'll be on the Alex Jones Show tomorrow from noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. We're going straight from the street action right onto the radio, and we'll be discussing the events of the day and getting into details about the information that we've uncovered.
Good. You guys need as much attention on this issue as you possibly can get. I mean, without a doubt, this needs to be exposed, and the lie needs to be exposed to everyone. Most people I know don't even know the details of Oklahoma City itself. They have no idea. None. They just think, well, I know there was a bomb or something, and it was some white guy that was pissed off, and he was in a militia or something. And it's amazing how there's a lot of information out there, but again, the mainstream public doesn't look for it. So you guys took everything that's there, the evidence that does exist, and the eyewitness accounts, and the actual stuff without speculation. You guys just show facts and witness accounts, witness testimony, stuff like that. And I think you really I think you brought your A game. There's no other way to put it. I mean, again, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know. I knew it was an inside job, but again, I'd only seen Murder in the Heartland, and I'd read some articles, and I'd done some research and read some theories. I'd seen Parton's work, but you guys kind of took all of that and then went above and beyond. How were you able to get in touch with all the survivors?
Well, I mean, a lot of this effort is largely an outgrowth of the efforts of the Oklahoma Bombing Investigation Committee started by State Representative Charles Key. And with access to him and his people and his contacts, and Chris Emery, who'd been doing his on-the-ground research here in Oklahoma City for almost a decade.
In addition to Wendy painting, between those personal relationships they cultivated, that really culminated in the interview subjects that we were able to bring into the film.
We've been talking to these people for years and trying to develop the story, do our own research. They become friends of ours, many of these survivors and victims' family members. And their story's finally told. Their story had not been told up until now. And if anything, that's the one reward I know that we have achieved, is finally these people's story is told before it's too late.
Yeah, because, time is starting to carry on, and eventually some of these people are not going to be with us anymore. Is Parton still around, or is he gone?
He's around. He's still vital and all that. He's actually, I believe, in Virginia.
Yeah, a lot of these people are getting up in age. VZ's in poor health, Hoppy's in poor health. A lot of the people we interviewed in the movie, they're.
It's kind of funny that we caught a lot of these people in their last, periods of vitality.
And lucidity. And, even Jane Graham, she said that's the last major interview that she was going to do for any type of, television documentary. They
had been in the fight so long. I mean, these people have put up with every machination thrown up against them by the mainstream media, by the government. They've been surveilled. They've been harassed. Their story's been ignored. They've gone to law enforcement. They've been ignored. And they were there. They saw things that they know and they will not deny to themselves, and they will not back away from the implications.
And they all say the same thing. It's up to the younger generation to take the torch up and run with it at this point.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that ought to inspire you enough to get up off your butts and do something. We owe them at least the effort, the minor effort it takes to do a little bit of research and actually go to the website, nobleye.com, and buy the film. Watch the movie. We owe them at least that. Pay attention. Listen to their story. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. I know that sounded like a sales pitch going into the break, so I want to make sure you understand. The reason I want you to get their movie is because we owe these people to get their voice out. We owe them to get their voice heard. And right now, the only way to get their voice heard is to get a copy of this movie and go have a screening. If you can get a large crowd of like 100 people or something, that's awesome. I'm sure if you take photos and pictures and stuff, I'm sure these guys would love it. I'm sure they would put it up on their Facebook page or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. And in addition to that, if you email us contact@freemindfilms.com and let us know that you're setting up a screening, we'll try to coordinate maybe even a Skype session where we can do a Q&A afterwards. We'll send you promotional materials, posters, flyers, that type of stuff.
Bam. You see what happens when you just ask, ladies and gentlemen? So do that. James, give out the email again. Go ahead and say it twice because I want people to get it for the screen.
It's contact@freemindfilms. Contact@freemindfilms, and if you want to get a copy of the documentary, it's anobleye.com.
Awesome. All right, I want to get your guys' thoughts on a few things. I want to speculate a little bit. I know people like to come on my show because I let people take the shoes off and relax a little bit. So let's speculate a tad bit. I know you guys both have seen Murder in the Heartland. For the ladies and gentlemen out there that don't know, it's an old documentary. You can find it on YouTube, but just look up Murder in the Heartland. It's a really good film about the Oklahoma City bombing. I suggest if you want, watch that and then watch A Noble Lie. Have a tribute, if you will, tomorrow. I guess you can't do it tomorrow, but within the next week, order the film, and then you can watch that one on YouTube. And then when the film comes in from these guys, you can watch their movie, and you can put them back to back, and you can see the evidence that's right in front of your face. Although, again, James and Holland and their crew took the evidence that Pat had gathered, and they worked from there, and they actually took it to a whole another level with a lot of the stuff. But there's something that Pat covered that people really don't talk about, and I want to speculate a little bit on this, because it could have been. I've asked, when it comes to 9/11, I've asked different people, engineers. I've never gotten a chance to talk to an explosives expert, like a demolition guy. I would love to. But I've mentioned the barometric bomb, because everybody's like, what did they use to take the towers down? And obviously thermite wouldn't explain the dustification of the building, but other explosives would. And Michael Riconosciuto in that movie, Murder in the Heartland, had mentioned with Ted Gunderson, when they were sitting there, him, Pat, and Riconosciuto were sitting there, and he had talked about this barometric bomb that he had worked on in his lab or shop, or whatever he called it. And then they broke in, stole it, and then a couple months later they did this quote-unquote raid and found drugs. And he figures when they stole the bomb is when they planted the drugs, which you see in the spy movies, and I'm doing air quotes all the time, so it's not a big surprise. It's not like that plot couldn't happen, So what do you guys think about the barometric bomb idea?
Well, obviously, we have looked into that, and we've compared it to the evidence on the ground. Ted Gunderson, former special agent in charge of L.A., who recently passed, God rest his soul, was, I believe, a proponent of the barometric theory, and I guess Pat Shannon got onto it based on the work of Riconosciuto. I'll just call him Ricky. Can't even say the name. I have looked at the evidence, and I've looked at the evidence for a barometric bomb, and it leads me to believe that there was nothing overly exotic with what was used in Oklahoma City. I'm not denying that there was exotic technology used in 9/11, but with Oklahoma City, there's nothing on the ground that could not have been done with conventional explosives. And even more specifically, I believe that it was C4 plastic explosive used inside the building for a variety of reasons. One, there's no reason to go exotic with this. All you have to do is strap a couple columns, the floors collapse. 4 columns to be precise. There were other bombs found inside the building. Apparently, according to the people on the scene, one of these other bombs was fulminated mercury, and it had military specification numbers. It was actually a military product. It was not a training device. It was an actual bomb. Now, I don't know if it came from the armory or if it came, but the word I'm getting from the responders is that it actually had mercury timers on it, and that they had failed to detonate, and they had been set to go off 10 minutes after the initial explosion to hit the first responders, and they did not go off. It had been strapped to the main gas line that runs through the Murrah building. It actually probably would have set the whole block on fire, so thank God that did not go off. I've also deposed a first responder. He was on the sheriff's SWAT team. He was also a medic, and he was there within an hour. He was called up, and he went in, and we did a video deposition with this guy, and he was in tears. This was a tough guy, and he was finally talking about some of the things he had seen that day. And he said that he was sitting on the curb. The chow truck had pulled up, feeding the rescuers and the responders. This is a couple days after the bombing. No, actually, this is the day of. This is the day of the bombing. That's correct. And he was sitting there taking a break. He was discouraged because, he hadn't found anyone alive. He was just finding body parts. And the ATF agents are standing there, and they're openly discussing the fact that they had already swabbed the interior columns for explosives residue, and it came up positive for C4. We see, like we discussed before, Jane Graham's testimony of the gray putty with the crew in the basement. This gray putty obviously resembles C4. So I do believe that it was C4 strapped to the columns. Now, I'm not denigrating the credibility of Ted Gunderson, Ricky, or Pat Shannon at all. What I'm saying is that the evidence that I've seen, the people I've interviewed, indicated that it was simply C4. In fact, when they brought the building down just over a month later, without any independent investigation, they brought the building down and buried the rubble under armed guard. They brought the entire building down, the remaining 2/3, with less than 200 pounds of C4. So it wouldn't have taken a lot, and C4 is very effective. And
Parkin talked about that. He said that they could have taken out those columns with a couple. He said exactly how he would have done it. He said he would have taken like a 5-gallon pail and filled it with C4 and pretty much left it by the column.
And again, I mean, Andreas Strassmeir is identified in the basement with what looks like C4 and dead cord.
Now, whatever was in the truck was not ANFO. We know that. We know that the cause of destruction to the Murrah building, what caused the pancaking floors, was C4 strapped to the columns. That is, I'm going on the line that it was C4.
You think the truck bomb was a dummy bomb, like a distraction bomb?
The truck bomb was a bomb. It was an ANFO. We know that for a variety of reasons, which we've covered. I mean, for one thing, there would have been huge chunks of burning ammonium nitrate everywhere. You never achieve 100% detonation with that stuff, especially when it's some kind of a home-brewed recipe. And then you drive it 300 miles over the highway, it's going to settle. I mean, luckily for them, it wasn't properly mixed, or it probably would have exploded en route. It was not ANFO. Talking to the first responders, the bomb squad members are talking about finding a lot of acetylene bottle caps everywhere. There's no reason for those things to be there except if they were in the bomb. And a lot of experts have commented that the characteristics of the truck bomb were indicative of an enhanced gas explosion. That is a conventional bomb enhanced with a bottled flammable gas. So the acetylene caps everywhere indicate that they enhanced it with acetylene. It was probably just C4 in the truck.
So a truck filled with C4 and then, wrapped on the outside with a couple of tanks of acetylene, just laying on either side to boot, just to add a little spice to it.
As a booster, and so that's what it appears what it was. The truck bomb, its purpose was merely to destroy the truck and create a crater. That's it. It would not have destroyed the columns in the Murrah building. It would have, if the truck bomb had gone on by itself, it would have killed a couple people, destroyed the windows, destroyed the facade. You certainly would have seen the catastrophic collapse.
I agree. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We're going to break. We'll be right back. More on the explosion and the bombs. Multiple. Yes, there's evidence for that. Again, in the film, ennoblelie.com. Check it out. You'll see the local news footage. I always tell you, pay attention to the local footage. We're going to break. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. We only have a half hour left, so I want to get into a few other things. If you want to look more, if you want to look up more about the explosion, I can't talk tonight. If you want to look up more about the explosions and the bombs they found, first, again, get the film, and you'll see the evidence in there. And Holland and James reminded me, Google the Parton Report. And what I'm going to do for the YouTube archive, and I'm going to post this on Federal Jack. I want to make sure I get this up ASAP for tomorrow. For like first thing, I'm going to stay up late tonight and get this done. I'll also throw a link for it in there in the description box and on the site with the interview. That way, everybody can go check out the evidence for themselves. And I'm going to throw up a link for the website, ennoblelie.com. And there's already a link over on Federal Jack. If you go to federaljack.com, right on the right-hand side, you'll see down towards the bottom, you'll see a link for, there's a little banner there for it. Just click on it, bring you right to the site, and you can purchase the film. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, I bought a few copies of the movie myself, so I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I don't do myself. And everybody that has purchased the film because they heard me say, get it and support them, they've all emailed me or talked to me in the chat on the show chat, or Skype messaged me, or hit me up on Facebook. Whatever way, I've gotten multiple messages, and everybody said that the movie just blew them away because they didn't know all of this stuff. And there's people like me that are researchers into all of this stuff. So if you want to see more about the evidence of explosions and multiple bombs and stuff, check out the Parton Report, definitely. But just get the film. It's that simple. All right, so let's get into McVey, guys.
I guess we can't ignore the role of Timothy McVey, if only for the fact that he's a central character in the official story. And in no way are we trying to imply that McVey is innocent or unwitting in what happened in Oklahoma City. He was a player, but he was definitely not the mastermind. Wendy Painting and I, the co-writer, have interviewed people who were close to McVey. Wendy has interviewed people who grew up with McVey. I have interviewed people who were in the Army with McVey, who were in the tank with him in the Persian Gulf War, who was his roommate in the Army for 2 years. You don't get much closer than that. And his roommate told me that McVey was a total tool, that he was incapable of independent action. Nice guy, heart of gold, had his bad side, whatever, but he was incapable of independent action. In fact, his quote was that if you ordered McVey to spit shine a cinder block, he would sit there and do it until it was done. Another man described that, working with him when he was a civilian is like you could tell him to take all the chairs on one side of the room, stack them to the other, and then tell him to do it again, and he'd do it without asking a question. When he worked security in Buffalo, they liked him because they would tell him to just stand there and guard a door, and he would stand there the whole time and not say a word. But he was totally incapable of pulling something like this off. And the people who knew McVey, they're all perplexed. They're like, how did this guy pull this off? He was a soldier. He was a good soldier, and he was following orders. In the movie, we interview an eyewitness named Mike Nations. He lived next to the Murrah building in the Regency Towers. And he was actually a first responder because he worked in the medical field. But about a couple days before the bombing, he goes down to the street. He's waiting for a friend to pick him up. They're going to the racetrack. And, this is before the days of cell phones, so he goes to the payphone outside the Regency. And standing there, this is before the bombing, standing there is Tim McVey at the phone. And Mike Nations was right next to him. He was leaning against the phone booth. And Tim McVey is in the phone booth talking on the phone with John Doe number 2. And McVey angrily slams down the phone and he yells, "He told us to effing stay here." And then he storms off with Mr. John. Who is he giving orders to McVey? That's what I want to know. And McVey was following orders. He was a good soldier, and we looked heavily in depth into his military record. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, by order, sealed his record, but some of the records were recovered by court. They've never released his military record in full, and they've released none of his special forces records and none of his psychological records. But we were able to obtain a portion of them. And when you review his military career, it's rather strange. He was a stellar soldier, promoted above his peers. He won the Bronze Star in the Persian Gulf War. Then he goes to, and he was universally described as the perfect soldier. He was fit physical shape, he knew his job, and he followed orders to the T. And then he goes off to try out for Special Forces. He drops out after 3 days, comes back a changed man. He's no longer interested in the Army. And he was like Mr. Super soldier. He loved the Army. He comes back from Special Forces. He doesn't like the Army anymore. He gets out. He joins the National Guard, gets out of that, then he goes on the move. But the fact is, he wrote letters to his family while he was in Special Forces training, telling them that he had been selected for a special program to work in covert operations. In fact, when McVey was arrested and they reported that he was no longer in the Army, that he was an ex-Army soldier, the family protested. They went to the FBI. They said, why are they saying McVey's no longer in the military? We have his letters. We have his records. They told us he was working special operations.
I mean, specifically saying that he was working with the CIA, bringing drugs into the country and eliminating security risks. I mean, this is in the transcripts with the family's conversations. I mean, it was their full understanding that's what he was doing. That's what he's told many people.
We were able to obtain the wiretap transcripts of the McVey family. The FBI had wiretaps on their family after the bombing, and the family's discussing this openly. Why are they saying that Tim is no longer in the Army? He was working Special Forces. And we know that McVey told other people that he was working for the government. He told Terry Nichols. Terry Nichols, mind you, has no reason to lie. He's going to die in prison. He's suffering under a life sentence under the federal system and a life sentence under the state system.
Why did he turn himself in so fast?
Because the bomb he built was not a bomb. McVey coerced him into assistance. McVey admits that he threatened his family. What Terry Nichols constructed at Gary Lake, Kansas would not have exploded. They took 55-gallon barrels full of diesel fuel, and they shoved wet chunks of fertilizer into the bunghole and then put a detonator in there. That's not an ANFO bomb at all. In fact, had they mixed it properly, it would have exploded en route. Bombing experts know you always mix it on site. You never move it around because either one, it'll settle and it's worthless, or two, it's going to blow up.
This stuff had gotten damp and it had coagulated into big, giant chunks. They were breaking it off in big chunks and dropping it in there. It wasn't like the small little prills that would evenly distribute throughout the fuel oil.
And even with that, even if it's optimal conditions, you still have to mix it, and you certainly cannot drive it a couple hundred miles down the highway in a Ryder truck, because if you did make it right, now you're a dead man. And the British Secret Service actually sent several Secret Service agents, MI6 and MI5, to Oklahoma City after the bombing to figure out how they did this, because they had been dealing with a lot of info bombs with the IRA, and they knew how info bombs worked, and this did not have the characteristics. What Terry Nichols made would not have exploded. He went along with it to avoid McVey, and the only reason McVey is the only accomplice in prison is the only reason Terry Nichols is the only accomplice in prison is Terry Nichols is the only accomplice to McVey, supposed accomplice, that was not a government informant.
You know, and he came out after all of his trials where, you know, he's not going to get caught on any type of double jeopardy. And he said, Holder told him, Ashcroft told him, I'm ready to come clean. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. And at that point, he went into media isolation. No one has been able to talk to him.
Terry Nichols has revealed to Jesse Trentadue that Tim McVey told him that he was working undercover for the FBI and that his direct handler was Larry Potts, assistant director of the FBI, the guy in charge of Ruby Ridge, who also played a role in Waco. And Larry Potts was also involved in PACCON. In fact, McVey told his first set of attorneys, his first attorney that he had here in Oklahoma was one of the best attorneys in the state, actually. And his first set of attorneys, he sat down with them and he told them that he had been recruited out of the National Guard to infiltrate neo-Nazi activities in the U.S. Army, and that what he did at Oklahoma City, he did under orders. He told his attorney that. You know what his attorney did? Backed out of the case. He said, I want no part of this. And they gave it to Stephen Jones.
And everybody asks, you know, it's like, well, if he was involved at this level, why would he not turn on people? Why would he not expose people higher up? You know, I mean, beyond what he said about Larry Potts. Well, I think the evidence of a predominant mind control expert, probably second at that time only to you and Cameron, Dr. John West, was consulting with the defense team, and his protege, Dr. John Smith, eventually, he passed it on to him, and he did even more extensive work with McVey. I mean, this guy worked with Patty Hearst, Saran, and Jack Ruby. You know, and there were witnesses that said that at the time that they saw McVey, they said he would have admitted to assassinating Abraham Lincoln. He was out of his mind. You know, I mean, why would they bring in a guy like Jolly West?
Jolly West was one of the largest MK Ultra contractors, and his protege, who directly treated McVey, was later chief of psychiatry at Guantanamo Bay.
I mean, this guy pioneered the techniques we're seeing at Gitmo right now.
Yeah, Gitmo's a little terrorist factory. It's a little mind control, MK Ultra terrorist factory.
Mm-hmm. That's why they're not interested in the older so-called terrorists. They want the young people so they're more easily manipulated and molded.
Yeah, well, look at Abdul Muttalib.
Absolutely.
Guy drools on himself, but he's a terrorist mastermind. Right, ladies and gentlemen. If you believe that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you. All right, we're going to break. Stay tuned. Final segment coming up. Don't go anywhere. All right, shameless plug time, ladies and gentlemen. You know I always like to use the beginning of the final segment to do plugs for my guests and anything I've been talking about, because I have a tendency to talk right up until the bumper music comes up, and there's never enough time. So before we get into anything else, I want to give James and Holland a chance to throw out shameless plugs one last time. Plug everything, your radio show, your website, any upcoming things, go.
We actually do a weekly radio show on the Logos radio network called Free Mind Report. You can go to freemindreport.com. You can listen live Mondays 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time, or check out the podcasts that are available on the website and iTunes. We've had all kinds of guests on there. I mean, most recently, we had Kurt Haskell. Yeah, Kurt Haskell. We were just talking to him about the underwear bomber. We're bringing in people that are we're talking about for interviewing on our next documentary, which is going to be State of Mind, the Psychology of Control. We're going to cover government and school indoctrination, propaganda, and psychological warfare. So these are the subjects that we are covering, in addition to information about, obviously, the Oklahoma City bombing. You can check that out at freemindreport.com, Monday 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time.
And we'll be on Alex tomorrow, 12 to 1 Central, and Coast to Coast this Saturday night. And, of course, Chris Emery is on the road. Tomorrow night, he's having a screening of A Noble Lie at the University of Wisconsin. And on Friday, 4/20 in Kansas City at the Uptown Theater. So if you want to see it on the big screen and talk to the narrator, ask questions, check out the website. If you're within driving distance, go check out the movie.
Yeah, Chris is one of those people. He's a walking encyclopedia of the event, so he'll be able to answer the questions.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. He really is. Oh, well, all of you guys are cool, but Chris is a really cool individual. He's very down to earth, and he'll talk to, if you approach him, he's not one of these snobby, people. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
He'll talk to you. He'll engage you in conversation, which is awesome. So That's good. Is there anything else? Facebook. You guys have a Facebook fan page for the website or the movie?
All of the links to those are on the website. So you go to nodelay.com, the Facebook link's there. You go to freemindreport.com, the Facebook link is on there. You can keep up with the current shows. You can keep up with what's going on with the screenings, the film festivals, that type of thing.
Yeah, we've been accepted to 4 film festivals so far. In fact, tomorrow, after the street action and after Alex, we're driving to the Bare Bones International Film Festival. We're actually the finalist for a Best Documentary Feature. And so we're looking forward to that also.
That is awesome. What 4 film festivals?
Reynolda, Vegas Independent, Filmcom, and Bare Bones.
Yep.
Is there any way that anybody can support you by going like to some website or something for any of these film festivals?
I don't think they work that way. We were looking
into
mainly
an industry insider thing. I mean, we're mainly going there for exposure. There's a variety of reasons we're not expecting this to get picked up for me.
Well, I mean, more like get it out there that you guys I would spam the events, let people know that you guys have this. This movie is going out to 4 different film festivals. Maybe if you guys. I'll work with you guys off air. We'll do something, and I'll put together I'll maybe do like a PR thing to let everybody know, hey, this movie is so on point that look, these people are taking it serious, because that's an important aspect that people need to realize. Not so much, like the people that tune into my show or maybe listen to your show, but. The general populace that's asleep, the sheeple that people like to call them, that's important. Somebody maybe in the film industry that sees that and says, "Wow, these independent, these independent people are looking at this." Anybody in the industry insiders are looking. Right. That's important because you never know. You know what I mean, dude? You never know.
Well, and that's what's been important about being independent is we were able to produce the product that we wanted without any influence from some sort of financial backer.
We had tried a number of times to go through other people to get this movie done, because at the beginning we weren't filmmakers. We just wanted to get the movie done. We were bringing people to the table to try to get it done, and what we found time and time again is that what people wanted to control the content, water it down, serve a certain agenda, and we couldn't let this story be manipulated to serve anyone but the people involved and the victims who are seeking truth. So James stepped up and formed the film company. He asked me if we could do this. I said we got no choice, and we went forward and did it.
Well, kudos to both of you. All right, we only have a few minutes left, guys. So I want to ask you the biggest question of all that not many people ask, I guess, but it should be asked: why? Why would anybody, even if it's a rogue faction, of course you never say the whole government did it, but this rogue faction in the government that happened to be in power at the time, who obviously is part of a larger agenda, but why would they do this? Why would they blow up a building and kill all those kids?
Well, absolutely, and this is the type of information that you won't get in the film because this is, personal opinion from the information that we've garnered. But what it looks like is there was a sting operation that was in effect that got taken live. And whenever you see these types of operations, this is time and time again, anytime there's a false flag, there's an active operation going on at that time. It's an axiom that people act in their own self-interest, and the rank-and-file agent and bureaucrat, after the event goes live, are complicit in the cover-up because they want to preserve their pensions and the institution. These institutions' primary goal is self-preservation, and so it's not that hard to believe, that this is the methodology that they use. Some people see it as mutually exclusive when we say it was a sting gone bad. I'm not saying it's bumbling idiots within the government that just accidentally did it. No. Obviously, there was an agenda at play, but again, the rank and file did not have the bigger picture. I don't see the government did it versus sting gone bad as being mutually exclusive. I think that those are two, they're one and the same. So then you have to ask yourself who benefits.
Well, the sting is the method of execution. Like James said, there's always a concurrent intelligence, police, or military simulation or exercise that's simulating the real event. Same thing with 9/11, same thing with every other false flag. There's always, and for every white op, there's a black op. And that's the method of execution. It was supposed to be a sting operation. It was supposed to blow up in the middle of the night, not kill anyone, be a big PR stunt. That's not what happened. It blew up in the middle of the day. It killed 168 people, and every agent involved is keeping his mouth shut from now on.
And you have to ask yourself, why? What is the bigger picture? Well, I think if you look at what was going on in the United States at that time, well, actually globally, you had a movement in this country that was resisting the expansion of police state powers, the loss of our constitutionally protected natural rights, and there was enormous resistance. After the Oklahoma City bombing, that was completely silenced. To this day, numerous events, they still invoke the name of McVey to silence any type of dissent against tyranny. I mean, just this recently with the case said they can strip search you for the most minor offense. One of the Supreme Court justices in their ruling actually said, well, look at the incident where they picked up McVey. You know, if you express any type of dissent against, this where this government is taking us, again, you're a McVey. It's meant to silence you. At that time, globalization was completely stalled. I believe the executive branch had an agenda that they were not able to achieve. NAFTA and GATT were completely opposed by the American people. They did not want the deindustrialization of this country. They did not want the expansion of globalization. After the Oklahoma City bombing, again, they were silenced. If you oppose this, you're a terrorist. You're a McVey. All of the expansion of police state powers through the omnibus anti-terrorism bill was resisted by the American people prior to the Oklahoma City bombing. Afterwards, if you resisted it, you were a McVey. They were silenced, and the legislation passed. You know, this is something that played out again in 9/11. Oklahoma City was the precursor. We see after 9/11, people accepted the Patriot Act, whereas a year before they would have said, no, you're crazy. We're not going to give up those rights. This is the methodology that they continue to use anytime that they've had a setback in their agenda and they want to take a giant leap forward of taking away your rights and expanding control over your life and the abuse of your natural rights.
And perhaps on a deeper level, the Oklahoma City bombing inaugurated the age of terror we all live in now. Before Oklahoma City, America was a place where you did not worry about terrorism, as hard as it is to imagine. Before 1995, even before 2001, but especially before 1995, you didn't worry about terrorism here. It wasn't a concern. It wasn't part of the daily discourse. The Soviet Union had failed. We had kicked ass in the Persian Gulf War. We had no external enemies. People were looking inward, and they were seeing problems with this country. The Constitution was being talked about, how the usurpation of our individual rights, like James said, and the talk even about the Federal Reserve was entering the national discourse that had never happened before. People were talking about real issues, and then they got scared. And what happens when you get scared? You cling to authority and you lash out at the designated outsider. And after Oklahoma City, everything was good again.
Yeah, everybody loved their big government. Everybody needed to be protected. And then you saw the rise of TV shows where, quote-unquote, militia guys in fatigues with machine guns were always plotting to overthrow the government in some camp in the woods.
Yeah, I mean, that's... I mean, like that undercover agent that was interviewed by Newsweek, he quit working undercover for the FBI infiltrating these groups when he realized that his job was not to stop crime, it was to incite crime. The militias were being run guns from the military. They weren't stealing them from military bases. They were being given guns.
Gun running by the government.
To give them an excuse to crack down. They were literally manufacturing a threat.
Where have I seen this before? And wasn't Eric Holder... Wasn't he around during Oklahoma City, too?
Yeah, actually, we had one of the people at one of the screenings saying, well, okay, I can believe a lot of this, but I can't believe that there was any planning involved. I said, well, look at Operation Gunrunner, Fast and Furious. You know, Eric Holder was part of the cover-up in the Oklahoma City bombing. You have over 2,000 human beings that have died in Fast and Furious, and it's come out in the mainstream media in their ATF's own internal emails that they were going to utilize this event to enact further gun control legislation. What's another 168 people on top of 2,000?
I agree, guys. I agree. We're out of time, unfortunately. Gentlemen, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you on my show. You are welcome back whenever you want. Ladies and gentlemen, get the movie A Noble Lie, noblelie.com. Thank you for listening tonight. I'll see you guys and gals on Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Semper Fi, I'm out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is an addendum to tonight's show with James Lane and Holland Vandennieuwenhof. And Holland's been so kind as to hang out after hours with me. We're going to record a bit of a addendum here, and I'm going to add it to the YouTube archives. So, Holland, there's a few things that you guys didn't discuss in the film, and I know you wanted a chance to talk about it a little bit. So let's get into the Middle Eastern connection first. What's the deal with the Middle Eastern connection? I've heard of John Doe number 2, but what's the whole deal with this?
Okay, yeah, something that, and we have faced a bit of a criticism over this, and I don't blame people, that we did not cover the body of evidence on a Middle Eastern connection to the bombing. And there's a couple of reasons we didn't put it in the movie. One primarily was time. It was in the original outline. I wrote it, but we simply did not have time, and we couldn't justify cutting out anything else. And we had a solid train of evidence from Andy Strassmeir with the bombs in the building, and he was connected to the neo-Nazis. Middle Easterners were involved, but it wasn't crucial to the line of evidence that we were pursuing. Now, the Middle Eastern connection mainly revolves around the work of former KFR TV reporter Jana Davis, we talked about in the interview. She was fired after the New York Times bought the station, and she continued to work trying to track down John Doe number 2. And it looks like John Doe number 2 was probably most likely, actually was, I will say was, Hussein al-Husseini, an Iraqi national who was brought into the country after the first Gulf War. And there were a lot of Middle Easterners involved with the bombing. They were not involved with putting the explosives inside the building. One thing about the Middle Eastern connection is that it's largely blamed upon Osama bin Laden and or Saddam Hussein. Well, both those guys are dead, and they weren't responsible for the bombing. So, I mean, that argument is kind of compromised that way. But one cannot ignore their involvement. Hussein al-Husseini was in Oklahoma City. He's brought over to this country under some kind of resettlement program. He was former Iraqi Army and, according to his own words, had fought against the U.S. Army in the first Persian Gulf War. So for some reason, he was brought back over here. And he was working for a man named Samir Khalil, who is a local slumlord here in Oklahoma City. And I've done a lot of work on that man, too. And actually, Samir Khalil had developed connections between the neo-Nazis and radical jihad, radical jihadists. And there was I didn't discover, but I have verified that there was a solid line of communications, logistics, and support between radical jihad and the neo-Nazis in this country. And that's a historical relationship and a philosophical relationship. They both hate the U.S. government. They both hate Jews. And they did work together in the past. And they also had connections to the IRA. The IRA had also worked a lot with the PLO, and the Aryan Republican Army here in this country modeled themselves after the IRA, and they were also pursuing Middle Eastern connections. And Samir Khalil, who employed John Doe number 2 in Oklahoma City, was actually involved in Utah in reaching out and networking with local skinhead and militia groups and talking about importing fully automatic AK-47 and stuff like that. None of it came to fruition. And probably he was doing this. Well, anyways, I won't get into too much speculation. I'll just go on the facts here. There was a Middle Eastern connection. We didn't cover it in the movie because it wasn't entirely congruent to the line of evidence we were pursuing. I believe that the Middle Easterners were involved in parking the Ryder truck and in a certain number of diversionary Ryder trucks. There was more than one Ryder truck driving around Oklahoma City that day. And they were part of the security around the perimeter. This was a sophisticated military operation. Like we said, we've already demonstrated that it wasn't just McVey parking a truck and walking away.
Feel free to speculate a little bit. You know that I don't mind speculation because it does cause people to actually sit and think and debate things, which brings about the real evidence anyway. So go ahead, speculate.
Well, I'm kind of speculating right now, but it's based upon what I see to be true. And I think that the Middle Easterners were involved in security around the perimeter, lookouts, and with a small amount of diversionary Ryder trucks. There were people in Oklahoma City, in Oklahoma, the week before the bombing, being pulled over at gunpoint by highway patrolmen simply because they were driving Ryder trucks. They reported to the bombing community. They said it was very strange. I mean, they were just normal people moving, and they had a Ryder truck, and they get pulled over, and a whole convoy of highway patrolmen show up, and they search the vehicle, and they ask them questions, and they send them on their way. And they never explained why they pulled them over. So they were looking for Ryder trucks because I believe, like I said, the sting operation was the method of execution. At some point, they realized they had lost control of the operation. Probably around midnight that night when Danny Colson out of Dallas, the former head of the hostage rescue team and was working in Dallas for the FBI, decided to stop in Oklahoma City and spend the night. He later lied and said he had sped at over 100 miles an hour from Dallas to make it to the bombing, but we have the Embassy Suites receipt where he checked in at midnight before the bombing. So he lied about that. He was in Oklahoma City. They lost control of the operation. They're looking for the Ryder truck. We have a PI on record who said that he stumbled upon a bunch of ATF guys at an intersection in Oklahoma City that morning with what appeared to be some kind of transponding devices. They were standing around, and they had these dish-looking devices in their hands, and they were kind of going in circles like they were trying to track a signal. This is from PI. He's familiar with this equipment. He knew exactly what it was. So they were looking for the truck. And I believe the Middle Easterners were involved in the deeper state operation, in the diversion tactics. And I think they may have thought they were turning the tables on the feds. Unbeknownst to them, there were federal informants running the thing from the entire get-go. So the Middle Easterners were involved, not so much in the execution of the bombing itself, but in a support role. And this terrorist cell in Oklahoma City that supported the Oklahoma City bombing later played a role in 9/11. Several of the 9/11 hijackers spent extensive time in Oklahoma City. In fact, Muhammad Atta and two other hijackers stayed at a motel on the west side of Oklahoma City, on a seedy part of town, the same motel that McVey had stayed in right before the bombing. And this hotel is on a bad side of town. There's probably a lot of bodies buried in the backyard. It's a cash-only place. You don't need to show ID. It's a perfect place to hang out if you want to keep a low profile and you don't want a whole lot of people asking a whole lot of questions. McVey used it, and then the 9/11 hijackers used it when they came here to Oklahoma City for some reason. They had a meeting here. What's funny about that is that at the time of that the hijacker was having a meeting here in Oklahoma City with Moussaoui, Zacharias Moussaoui, who was living in Oklahoma at the time, taking flight lessons at OU, Airman Flight School. At the same time that happened, the University of Oklahoma, which is just down the road from Oklahoma City, had recruited an active CIA officer to be the CIA officer in residence at OU. This is a rare position for a university. Very few universities have a CIA officer in residence. And this man was named David Edger. David Edger had been former head of covert operations for the CIA, the head jackal. By his own admission in the class he taught at OU, he had taken part in the destabilization of foreign governments, the buying off the press, dirty tricks. He bragged about it. He was proud of it. David Edger, right before the 9/11, later took an apparent demotion from head of covert operations for the CIA, head jackal, to being in charge of the surveillance team that monitored Muhammad Atta and the others in Hamburg, Germany, when they were living in Germany. David Edger stepped down to personally watch these guys while they were making phone calls to the U.S., talking to Zacharias Moussaoui. David Edger was later at OU when these same people, Zacharias Moussaoui, Muhammad Atta, and two other hijackers, met in Oklahoma City. So whatever support team was activated to support the Oklahoma City bombing was later activated in support of 9/11. In fact, Hussein al-Husseini, who has been named and identified by over a dozen witnesses as John Doe number 2, and mind you, there were several John Doe number 2s, but we're talking the one who was in the truck with McVey. They named Hussein al-Husseini as John Doe number 2. He actually sued Channel 4 News because they named him on air as John Doe number 2. He sued Jana Davis, sued KFR News, lost because his alibi was proven a lie for the morning of the bombing. In fact, several people saw McVey hanging out with Hussein al-Husseini in bars in Oklahoma City before the bombing. I know several of these people. I mean, they weren't trying to maintain a low profile here in Oklahoma City at all. They were trying to create a script that just couldn't take. Hussein al-Husseini later went to work for Boston's Logan Airport as a baggage handler. In fact, he was the baggage handler at Boston's Logan Airport when 9/11 happened, and two of the hijacked flights took off out of Logan, and out of that airport is actually where Muhammad Atta's luggage got misplaced, and they later found it with the incriminating last will and testament that all pinned on Osama bin Laden.
And we're supposed to believe this is all a coincidence.
Yeah. So
let me ask you something about those photos, the infamous Ryder truck photos. You and I had talked about this off air. What I asked if they were real, and you said they were. What was the pilot's name, if you know it? And what's the story behind the photos and the evidence that you know to support that those photos are real?
In the first couple of years after the bombing, a set of photos came up on the burgeoning internet showing Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, which is a National Guard or Oklahoma Reserve base here in Oklahoma. and it's an Army installation. And there was a small facility in one of the backwater portions of Camp Gruber that was fenced off. That had a bunch of Connex boxes in there, and in this facility was sitting a Ryder truck. This photo was taken before the bombing, right before, I believe, the month of April. And there's a Ryder truck sitting there. And then a lot of speculation, innuendo came out that this was the Ryder truck that may have been used. That's where they made the bomb or whatever. Then this, and I've actually corresponded with the man who helped break this story with Ted Gunderson. And they started doing their homework, and the Army later admitted that, yes, this was a Ryder truck. Yes, this was an Army facility at Camp Gruber. Yes, this Ryder truck was there. And the specific facility that this Ryder truck was at was a DARPA facility, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They are hip deep in covert ops, hip deep in black ops, hip deep in extensive technology, hip deep in spookery, DARPA. And they admitted it was a DARPA facility with this Ryder truck, but they were involved in another program that, of course, had absolutely nothing to do with the bombing. And that's pretty much where the investigation ended on that. And we had actually the pilot got scared to death. He was going to come forward through Ted Gunderson, and somehow the security was penetrated. They found out his name, and he was threatened, and he backed off. So his name is not known, but the photographs are verified. The Army verified that there was a Ryder truck at a DARPA facility at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, just before the bombing. And there's actually photos before this time period and after. Apparently, this pilot was just taking random photos of kind of the same areas on his route. And right before this photo was taken, just a couple months before, this facility is overgrown and not being used. Then it all of a sudden it's resurrected, mowed down. They move in all this equipment. They move in the Ryder truck, and then a photo a couple months afterwards, it's once again abandoned. So this facility, this DARPA facility, was activated right before the bombing. They had a Ryder truck, and then immediately after it was deactivated. So it appears that it may have been involved, but farther than that, we can't prove.
Interesting. And do you know where the full photos can be seen at all, or no?
The originals are not to be found.
Really? They're gone now?
We don't know where they are. Ted Gunderson is dead, and the pilot's not talking. Maybe
Gunderson probably had copies of them, but that's a good point.
But the fact is, the Army confirmed that the photos weren't fake. And
there are two photos I found online of the only two photos that I see. It's not a before or after. It's of the time, but you could tell that anybody with half a brain could see it's in an old abandoned facility, and they're only using a portion of it. And it's one of them is a far off shot where you see the fenced in area, and it's kind of a perspective shot, and then one's a different angle, and you can see the full Ryder truck.
And also Jane Graham, she actually talked about this on PrisonPlanet.tv tonight. That if they put it in there, I haven't seen the version they put on air, but I saw the interview, obviously. She talked about the fact that she had seen McVey in the building several times before the bombing, and a lot of people reported seeing McVey in the building, which is no surprise. What's only surprising is that the government denies he was ever inside the building, which is stupid. He was a military guy. He would have scouted his target, obviously. I mean, he'd been in war. He's a professional. He would have done recon on his target. They deny he was ever in the building. Because probably Jane Graham says that every time he was in the building, she shared an elevator with him, and she noticed and she remembered him distinctly because she's a very friendly person, and it's Oklahoma City, it's a small town, people are very friendly, and that she would say hi, people would say hi to him, and he wouldn't even say anything back. He would just kind of look down, and that was very distinctive. It's very unusual. She remembered him, and also that he was always wearing camouflage pants and a T-shirt. He was always wearing that, and he always got off the elevator every time he was in the Murrah building on the floor where the military recruiter center was, always. And also where the DA was. So, I mean, he was probably reporting to either military or law enforcement.
Do you think that he was a useful idiot, or do you think he knew more?
He knew more, but he was a moron.
That's what I meant. Was he stupid?
He was stupid. I mean, sorry. I mean, he was.
No, I know. I'm no, Paul. I know you don't have to be PC with me.
Well, he scored high on intelligence tests and so forth. But from everyone who knew and worked with him, he was just a regular dumbass. There wasn't nothing special about him, and he certainly wasn't capable of anything extraordinary like this.
So he totally would have been a useful idiot as a patsy and somebody to, a gopher to do things here and there, but definitely somebody that they were going to, knowing their modus operandi as you do. Would you look at him and say, yeah, he's the perfect patsy?
Yes, obviously. I mean, like I said, I interviewed his roommate and his battle buddy in the first Gulf War, who was in the tank with him, and he said, he would follow any order. He was incapable of independent action, but he would do anything you told him to do, and he would get it done. In fact, his exact words, he would spit you on a cinder block if you told him to do it. And, I have sat down with a defense investigator who worked with the defense during the trial. This man was a former assistant chief of police of Houston. He became a PI, and he was hired by Stephen Jones to pursue a lot of angles with the bombing. And Stephen Jones did what he did what he could get out. He wasn't allowed to do a lot, but a lot of people criticize Stephen Jones, the defense attorney. He wasn't allowed to do a lot of things, and he was blackmailable. I won't get into that. But anyways, I sat across the table. He's going
to be on radio, and because right now it's 12:47 a.m. as we record this broadcast. He's going to be on radio down here in the morning on the FM at like 6:30 or 7, and they were promoting it this morning. They were like, McVey's attorney, on the whatever the morning show was.
Well, he's talking truth. But during
is he? Because they
yes.
said that he was going to say things that you've maybe never heard before. So I was
Listen to him. Stephen Jones, he was only allowed to do certain things in trial. I know this. I've been told this, and I also know that he's a genuine person who wants the truth told. He got out a lot of information that no one had ever seen, and he presented as much as he could in court. He was not allowed to present a lot of in court, but in his book, Others Unknown, if you really want to do some homework, read that one. That's one of the that's in the syllabus. And to this day, he has done things to get the truth out. He does what he can. He's not allowed to do a lot. So
does he know about you guys and your work?
He, our co-writer, interviewed him a couple years ago, but if he's aware of our specific work, we have not reached out to him about it at all. So I have no idea. Likely he has. This movie has already made its rounds among certain political circles in Oklahoma City. I've been told this, and I'm sure he's seen it. I'd be surprised if he hadn't, or at least heard about it.
What's the feedback that you guys, anything you've gotten on the DL that you guys, any good feedback, bad feedback?
Well, I know that I can't go into too much detail, but certain characters who appear in the movie are still pursuing political careers, and that their political enemies have obtained copies of the movie in an attempt to get incriminating evidence, and these people are pretty high up. So the movie is being seen. I mean, if they're going to watch it to try to find something they can use against people, obviously they're watching the movie.
So somebody that you guys, not so much that comes forward with evidence, but somebody that you guys... Or is it that way? Someone comes forward with evidence, and then they're trying to use that against them? Is that the way it is?
They're trying to use statements against this person who's in politics. And you can obviously, if you pay attention enough, you can probably figure out who it is. Anyways.
That's pretty dirty and underhanded.
Well, I mean, there's nothing they can use against it, and if it gives more, if they actually try to use the movie against them, that's more publicity on the movie. So actually, I don't think they even want to do that.
Yeah, they probably won't. They probably watch the content of the movie and went, "Oh my God, we can't discuss this."
No, they can't. I mean, there's nothing they can get us on. I mean, I would welcome, please, if you're listening, if you want to come out there and defend the official story, let's meet at high noon in a debate square. And I challenge anyone to defend the official story against the evidence we've compiled. I would welcome the opportunity, but no one would be foolish enough to defend that wet paper bag. It doesn't hold water.
And the silence on the anniversary is deafening. I mean, you guys haven't gotten phone calls from the mainstream. I mean, the alternative media is a fire. You guys a slew of interviews, but the mainstream media, the silence is deafening. How they spit the official story, and they might say, well, there's websites out there with conspiracy theories and blah 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 blah. Websites. Did any of you sit down and watch the movie and take 2 hours out of your time and watch the film? I swear. Look, I've said it on the radio show, and I'll say it again here in this little addendum to it. The movie needs to be seen because there's nothing else out there that's compiled this evidence in the way that you guys present it, that people can understand it, and they can. It makes it palatable to them.
We designed it as a wake-up tool by presenting the evidence first, showing the unimpeachable evidence that cannot be disputed, that as at a variance with the official story, demonstrating the capacity of the government to carry out a cover-up, demonstrating the capacity of the government to kill people to continue that cover-up. And then we just kind of allude at the end towards these deeper implications, and people can take it from there however far they want to take it.
Do you plan on doing a sequel to it to pick up where you left off with the first one, with why they would do such a thing and lead into other things at all?
People have asked us about a sequel. I don't find one necessary at this time, and I don't think one would be necessary for a while unless they release the videotapes. But we are pursuing the Terence Yeakey case, and we are going to raise funds and promote and get a publicity to get his body exhumed and get an autopsy, which has never been performed on his body. And the Oklahoma City Police Department and the political establishment is going to have to explain why they covered up the obvious murder, torture murder of one of Oklahoma City's finest of the fine, one of their finest officers they ever produced, why they covered up his death. So that's going to be very embarrassing. And we're going to film every aspect of that quest and crusade. And we're probably going to release that as a documentary whenever we get done with that. But we've been told time and time again by a lot of mainstream people who watch this movie that the story of Terence Yeakey really struck them because, this society, they glorify cops. And that's what really hit people, was that they could do this to a cop. And so we're going to pursue that. And so if any sequel, we're going to seek justice for Terry Yeakey because his family deserves it. And he deserves it. He was an outstanding individual in every sense of the word, and he was literally killed for trying to do the right thing.
And we covered him earlier on air in the show. Is there anything that we didn't get a chance to cover about Terence and his murder, his death, that you want to get into? I mean, we have all the time in the world, so feel free.
Well, one fact is that Terry Yeakey's death, Don Browning, who was also an Oklahoma City police officer, he talked at length about Terence Yeakey in the movie. He knew him. He worked with him. He knew the guy. He knew what he was doing, and he knew that it was a murder. Craig Roberts, police officer, he explains Terence Yeakey. He knows it was a murder. The cops know. I've been approached by cops who told me themselves they knew about it, and I didn't even bring it up. The lesson had been passed on. So one of the officers involved, his partner, actually, Terence Yeakey's partner, the day of his funeral, right after the funeral, that man went home, packed all his shit into a moving truck, and moved to Dallas. He got out of town, and he was scared. And so the message was definitely passed, and the cops knew. And some people ask, well, why didn't the cops stand up? Why didn't they do anything about Terence Yeakey when they killed one of their own? Well, the leadership in the Oklahoma City Police Department was corrupted. The chaplain was informing on Terence Yeakey had gone to the department chaplain, confessing some of these doubts he was having about the official story. Chaplain Poe. Poe turned around and was informing on everything Terry was saying to his superiors. The police chief of Oklahoma City at that time was a guy named Gonzalez. I forget his first name. He left shortly after the bombing. He wasn't even there for too long before the bombing, and he was brought in from Dallas, and he was never considered a member of the department. He spent most of his weekends in Dallas golfing with his FBI buddies. In fact, Patrolman Gonzalez on November 22nd, 1963, had been a young Dallas patrolman at the Dealey Plaza. So, I don't know if he's involved with that, but that's the atmosphere he came from, and he definitely played a role in the cover-up. He was head of the police department. And he was probably brought in specifically to manage this case, just like Governor Frank Keating was brought in as governor to handle this case. Frank Keating had been a longtime Republican insider. He'd been former assistant director of the Treasury in charge of the ATF. And in fact, Frank Keating's brother, Martin Keating, wrote a book called Final Jihad.
This is incredible. Now, before you go any further, I want to kind of frame this. Now, you just heard Holland say that the governor his brother wrote a book. Okay, now I'm going to pause him there for a second because I want you to think about something. Every time something like this happens, you see it foreshadowed. 9/11, about 5-6 months before, they had the Lone Gunman series spin-off from the X-Files, and their pilot episode was a plane. It was an episode about the CIA, or this rogue element of the CIA hijacking this plane and remotely flying it, or trying to remotely fly it into the World Trade Center to crash it and blame it on Muslims, and then start a new arms race and everything else because of the resulting wars and military action, and so on and so forth.
You see the Titan with before the Titanic.
I was going to get into the Titanic. I wasn't sure if you had heard.
I've done my homework.
Yes, isn't that interesting as well?
Yeah. And with Oklahoma City, you see Final Jihad, which is a movie about, not a movie, a book written 3 years before the bombing, as confirmed by the publisher. In fact, Martin Keating himself bragged about writing the book on the Stan Solomon show before the bombing. He was claiming he was being prophetic. What he didn't talk about is that there was a short passage in the book about a bombing plot to bomb a federal building in Oklahoma City by a character who's only briefly mentioned and then dropped, and this character's name is Ted McVey, who is pulled over, and the plot is foiled by an Oklahoma State patrolman who pulls him over. Now, remember, McVey was actually arrested after the bombing by an Oklahoma State highway patrolman who was
every time I hear
outside
the
his area.
story, I get goosebumps, dude. Literally, I as I'm sitting here listening, and I know the story, I watch the goosebumps go up my arm every time I hear it because it's so creepy. The guy's name was Ted McVey. And it just so happens that the governor's brother writes this book. Come on.
We're not. We can't. If we made that up, we'd be morons. It's not made up. Martin Keating bragged about it on the Stan Solomon show. And Martin Keating himself admits deep connections to intelligence. He dedicated the book to some weird society called the Circle of Color or something like that. A real strange attribution in the beginning of the book, and he admits his connections to intelligence. And actually, Final Jihad prophesized 9/11 too, because it talks about a president who's in Florida at the time of the attacks, about planes that escape interception that are hijacked to crash and cause mass casualties. It talks about remote control jets using a flight simulator. It talks about 9/11 too. And actually, Martin Keating has promised a follow-up, and as soon as it comes up, I'm going to read it so I can figure out what else they're going to do next.
Right? You better read the book and take notes, because, anybody that thinks that this is a joke, again, ladies and gentlemen, the Lone Gunman, the book, The Wreck of the Titan that Holland mentioned, that correlates with the Titanic. You've heard me do a couple shows with Steve Stars on the Titanic multiple times now, so I don't have to reiterate that disaster. Why is it every time one of these disasters happens that these people benefit from, they foreshadow it with some tale, whether it be in a book or a movie? This was the BP oil disaster. Was there foreshadowing with that movie Knowing, the year before?
Yeah. Well, this is perhaps how they brag to each other and communicate the fact that these events are being controlled. Like we saw, the Spain bombs happened 911 days after 9/11 or something like that. Or was that 7/7? I forget which one. But they communicate with each other perhaps in this twilight language. This is of course just speculation, but yes, they always advertise in advance and they brag about it, and then they do it and they reap the benefits, and in some way they assert ownership of the world by bragging about their feats and getting away with it.
We speculated on air a little bit about the explosives and stuff. Let's talk about that again. Let's speculate maybe how easy it would have been for them to get that stuff in there. How about the fact that there was this huge armory there with which it was the ATF. They said that there wasn't. I think they had warheads in there, literal like artillery rounds up in the locker in there, which they said didn't exist, right?
They could have financed a small third world country out of the armory they kept in the Murrah building against federal law. They weren't supposed to be keeping anything explosive or destructive, not even weapons or ammunition, in that building, because it was a civilian federal building. Social Security was in there, FDIC, all kinds of, most of them were civilian agencies, almost all of them, and a daycare with dozens of kids in there. So, they were not supposed to be keeping that armory in there, and they deny its existence to this day. But during one of the evacuations after the bombing, they were pulling rescuers in to haul C4 out of this armory. And we have it on tape. We have them in ATF uniform pulling the C4 out. And
it's in the movie, right?
Yeah, it's in the movie. And that's from a sheriff's deputy's tape that was provided to the bombing commission by a deputy. And the original script for the Oklahoma City bombing, the day of, the ATF announced that it was a truck bomb with 1,200 pounds of explosives. Now, how would they know how big the bomb was? Why would they even hazard a guess and say any figure, 1,200 pounds? Why are they saying 1,200 pounds? That is the original figure. They're bandying about the day of the bombing. Well, interviewing one of the first responders, the bombing commission found out that he had been pulled off. The ATF rounded up a posse. He said, we need some people. We need volunteers. He raised his hand, and a lot of people did. Like, yeah, we're here to help. They were rescuers. And they pulled him in to start hauling this ordnance out of the armory. They were pissed. They could hear children crying under the rubble. And they are here under orders pulling out weapons and explosives out of this armory. And the ATF agent told them, yeah, there was 1,200 pounds of C4 in there. We did the inventory last week. We think that's what went up. So that's where the original figure come out. They were hoping, actually, to destroy all of that ordnance, and it would have gone up had the other bombs that they found that did not go off, had they gone off, all of that stuff would have disappeared. And they were hoping it would disappear. But
yeah, they wanted to bring that whole building down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then get rid of whatever. I wonder what that ordinance was from that they wanted to bring the building down. I mean, I know that would be just like adding the acetylene, to the truck bomb to give it a little more oomph and give it a little more.
They were providing explosives to informants and militias.
So you think they were you think they were kind of like with how they took down Building 7 and they covered up a lot of the evidence that was inside that building? You think they did the same thing?
That's why FBI agents were stepping over victims who were bleeding in the rubble, picking up a piece of paper and moving on. Literally valued paper over human life.
The connections between Oklahoma City and 9/11 keep. It's just every time,
yeah,
I know the basic premise, but every time you look at this, the more, because both events you dive into, they're very deep. There's intertangled webs, but you realize that they're connected in more ways than you even could imagine.
Yeah, you cannot view these events as separate events. They are part of
or 93 either. The
that's
93
ammonium bomb with a Ryder truck provided by an FBI informant. Same thing, same script. And I mean, the only reason we know that is because the informant got cold feet, started recording his conversations with his FBI handler because he thought he was going to get blamed for it. He probably would have had he not recorded those conversations. And he later disappeared in the witness protection program. He was probably thrown out of a helicopter in the ocean.
The script. I've heard that, I've heard different theories about, it was just done. It was pulled off by the Clinton administration, and that's it. It was done just to bring about this police state. And I get that, but I know there was much more. You've talked about the Middle Eastern connection and that there was a sting and stuff. What exactly do you mean when you guys say a sting? Because I know you mentioned it on air, you and James, and you talked about it with me here, but I neglected to ask you to get a little more in detail. What was the sting meant to sting? Like, who were they trying to nail originally before this mutated into what it turned into?
Oklahoma City did not turn out the way they had originally hoped. They did screw up massively.
Yeah, this was a big screw up, right?
On many levels. They used it as much as they could, but they couldn't take it as far as they wanted because they made a couple crucial mistakes, and I'll get into that. Something about this movie that people don't know is that, I don't want to brag, but we put our asses on the line a number of times. When we went out to Elohim City, I mean, that was hairy. We went out there to interview someone who had seen McVey. This man, the only reason he was going to talk to us, Josiah Stone, was that he had been assaulted by members of Elohim City and that they had shot his horse and they had assaulted him and broke his shoulder, and now he's willing to talk. He wasn't saying anything new. He was just corroborating what dozens of other people had said. And while we were there at Elohim City, I mean, the man who had brought McVey to Oklahoma City was driving by checking us out. This is the same guy who had shot this witness's horse a couple weeks previously, a man who's not averse to using violence. And later on, we had to go down to Utah, me and Wendy Painting, the co-writer. We went on our own. We drove out to Utah from Oklahoma. And we were trying to track down a man named Johnny Bangerter out in Utah. Johnny Bangerter's name was all over the bombing. His names were all over the phone records. As much as we knew, Johnny Bangerter was involved in the bombing. We didn't know who this guy was. We wound up interviewing witnesses in the high desert of Arizona. I later learned that during one of my conversations that there had been a gun pointed at me the entire time, because we were talking to a notorious white supremacist out in Arizona. I learned later that his brother was inside the house with a gun trained on me. We finally tracked down Johnny Bangerter, and he had an amazing story to tell, which we verified to a T. He was not lying. Before the bombing, Johnny Bangerter was a somewhat prominent person. He was chief of security of Aryan Nations. He's no longer involved in contentious racial politics. He's gone totally to the other side. The only reason he got into racial politics was that he was enraged at the government for a variety of reasons. And mainly, he grew up under the nuclear testing in Nevada that had deformed his sister, and then he got into punk rock. He was angry at the government, and the only people who seemed to be talking action in the early and mid 80s were white supremacists who were talking about, fighting the government. So that's who he wanted to be with. So he adopted their ideology, and he rose in the ranks. He was chief of security of Aryan Nations. And his job, mainly as chief of security for Aryan Nations, was to foil federal sting operations. And a sting operation is where an informant entices and provides material for a crime, which is then stopped at the last moment, and the criminals are arrested. Oftentimes, law enforcement will cross a line and encourage and provide materials and manufacture a crime that never would have occurred without federal initiation. That's usually the case. 99.9% of the people who are talking about overthrowing the government, first of all, they're usually an informant in some manner. They've usually been pinched on something, and they are providing information in some manner. Secondly, they're just talkers. They're just talkers. And until the feds give them weapons to talk them into it, they're never going to do anything. Tim McVey started trying to get a hold of Johnny Bangerter, He was leaving gifts at his house, but Johnny Bangerter wanted nothing to do with McVey. And Timmy McVey was going by the alias of Tim Tuttle at this time. He wanted nothing to do with this Tuttle character. He was always trying to meet Johnny Bangerter in hotel rooms. He's like, I don't meet strangers in hotel rooms. That's where sting operations go down. And we actually discussed this at length on Late Night in the Midlands. I actually shared a show with Johnny Bangerter last week, and the story was explained at length. But here's the story, in short. Before the bombing, Johnny Bangerter was approached by a man he knew to be an informant, because this guy was always talking trash about overthrowing the government, always trying to get Johnny to fire off automatic weapons. That's an informant. Because if you even touch an automatic weapon and your fingerprints are on it, guess what? You're a felon and you're going to jail, and you can never own a weapon again for the rest of your life. So he knew this guy was an informant, but he kept him around because the philosophy was basically back then in the movement was that you keep your enemies close and you keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Why bust an informant and then try to figure out who his replacement is? You keep them in place, you feed them misinfo, fill their head full of crap, and they just report on nothing, and they pay for everything. The informants pay for everything. I mean, he said they paid for their trips to Aryan Nations. That's why they kept him around. They paid for everything. They were peeling off hundreds. So this man who he knew to be an informant because of his behavior started coming up to Johnny Bangerter saying, hey, let's go bomb a federal building. And Johnny Bangerter would keep his mouth shut. He knew you don't say yes, you don't say no, you don't say a thing. You don't want anything on that tape. You don't want your name on that tape. And he wouldn't say anything. He'd change the subject. And he kept on saying, let's go bomb a federal building. Let's go bomb a federal building. And they were probably going to Johnny Bangerter because Johnny Bangerter was a big talker. And he had made a big soundbite about how they should level the IRS building in Salt Lake City. So they were going after Johnny. They were trying to pin a bombing on him. And so he wouldn't say anything. And then this informant shows up at Johnny Bangerter's house, and he says, hey, come out to my van. And Johnny Bangerter's like, uh-oh, what is this? They go out there, and inside the truck are sacks of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, Tovex boosters, diesel fuel, and automatic weapons, and deck cord. Now, the official story for the Oklahoma City bombing says that the bomb was composed of ammonium nitrate, diesel fuel, and Tovex boosters. We know that wasn't what was used, but that's what the script is. So he's got this guy before the bombing. I mean, in the weeks before the bombing, in the months. This is 1995. This informant trying to get Johnny Bangerter in this plot to bomb the federal building in Las Vegas with a Ryder truck, with ammonium nitrate and Tovex boosters. And Johnny wanted nothing to do with it. And this informant kept on coming to him, trying to get him involved, and he wouldn't have nothing to do with it. And then this informant later just kind of drops off the scene after the bombing, just disappears. And they don't hear from him a while, and then they later get a letter from this guy, and it's from a detention center. The guy's in jail. And the letter says, "Hey, Johnny, I'm in jail. That's why I've been out of touch, and I want to apologize to you and your family. I was pinched on automatic weapons violations by the ATF, and they were trying to get me to recruit people in this plot with the Ryder truck and the ANFO, and I couldn't get anyone to do it, and guess what? I'm in jail." We have verified this story. This story was actually covered to an extent in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. The man was named by name as a ATF informant who failed, and because of that, who is now in jail. I won't name his name on air because we have yet to interview him, and frankly, I don't want to endanger his life. And so what we have is a script that the ATF was running before the bombing: ANFO, Ryder truck, federal building, Tovex boosters, which played out in Oklahoma City. And how Johnny Bangerter was involved with the bombing was that Tim McVey was trying to approach Johnny Bangerter. Tim McVey was part of this plot with this informant. They were working together. The same guy who was pushing the Ryder ANFO plot was also friends with McVey. And that we came out to interview Johnny Bangerter because his names were all over these phone records that Tim McVey was supposedly making calls and Johnny Bangerter was supposedly calling him. We go out there and we interview Johnny Bangerter. What we discover is that the phone records we had were the ones that had been forged by the FBI after the bombing. The FBI got the wrong Johnny Bangerter. The phone number and the person, the address they had listed in the phone records was Johnny Bangerter Sr. And he had nothing to do with the bombing. He was not making phone calls. He was not involved with the movement. He was not involved with his son's activities. And Johnny Bangerter himself, the one they were trying to pin, he had verifiable alibis for most of the times when these phone calls were placed. And we know this is true because we confirmed this with the defense investigator who confirmed this. The defense investigator actually confirmed that the phone records were forged, and when he found out about it, his face turned white because he suddenly realized that the fix was in. They were trying to rope in a vast right-wing conspiracy or a jihadist conspiracy. I think there were two scripts, and they were going to go with one or the other, depending on whatever the agenda needed more, either domestic terrorist attack or a foreign Islamic attack. At that time, the country benefited more, actually the establishment benefited more from a domestic right-wing terror attack, so they went with that, but they couldn't even carry it out all the way because they had screwed up the frame-up. They had totally screwed up the frame-up. First of all, no one was biting on the ANFO plot because most of the morons had already been pinched on other plots and were thrown in jail. The only ones left in the neo-Nazi movement at that time in the early 90s were guys who had survived several of these pinups, and they knew better than to get involved with these people. And so the dumb ones were already in jail. The ones who were left weren't biting, and the people they tried to pin on it anyway, they screwed up the frame-up. They screwed up their phone records. So they could not roll with the script. So they did what they could. They pinned it on Tim McVey and these two other doofuses, and they just blamed it on the spirit of right-wing dissent and paranoia, although they couldn't actually pin it on any players.
It actually wasn't as well planned as one would believe, which
they screw up left and right, but they can rely upon the mainstream media to not pursue this, and we can see the co-option of the mainstream media.
But this actually shows how you guys are just 100% on the mark. This is a key thing and a key fact that could actually help relate this to, or make people relate to this information a bit better. Because people say, "Oh, there's no way that they could pull off something so spectacular. The government screws up everything."
They did screw up left and right with this.
That's what we'll see. This shows that this was a bumbling screw up from start to finish. And that, like you said, the mainstream media was just complicit in covering it up, and that's really
all the government has to do is offer a paltry excuse, and that's it. It's never followed up. And if someone does really get on fire and pursue it, the fix gets in, like we saw with ABC 2020. They did a whole hour on Oklahoma City, and it got pulled at the last minute because of the Justice Department. So, they co-opt the media, and they can rely upon that, and that's been like that for decades.
And it's amazing how The narrative can be set by the media, just like with 9/11. Who told you that Bin Laden did it? It wasn't the government. The first people to tell you was CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, CBS, ABC, PBS, and all the rest. Yeah.
I mean, it's come out that one of the ABC reporters who was involved in investigating the bombing for ABC was an FBI informant. We have the FBI 302s where they're talking about this ABC reporter providing the FBI information on what ABC is uncovering. They were every lead that ABC was uncovering, this informant, this reporter, was feeding it right back to the FBI so the FBI could go in there and corrupt the evidence. This guy is now one of the bigwigs at CBS.
Interesting. I didn't know that. That's an interesting piece of information that I was very unaware of until this very moment. But see, it doesn't surprise me. A lot of these people that play ball when they're younger end up becoming bigwigs of companies and stuff later on. Because
that's how you move up into the deep state. Is you play ball, you cover up, and they know they can trust you. They got a little dirt on you because you got a couple dirty habits, so they know they got something to use against you, and you've already played ball, so they know they can rely upon you. And if you ever get a twinge of conscience and say, "There's no way I'm going to do this. I've done some messed up things in the past, but there's no way I'm going to cover the murder of 168 people," they're like, "Really? Well, I got these photos of you in this hotel with this woman who isn't your wife, and you better play ball if you want a future political career. We'll ruin you, or we'll kill you." And they're like, "Okay, I guess I'm owned." And they are owned.
I agree. They get owned, and then the whole dirt thing. That's why people say, why is it important to know some of the stuff like, what's the deal with Bohemian Grove? Well, all of those cabins at Bohemian Grove have cameras in them.
Yes.
And they record what goes on in there. So when these politicians think that they're out in the middle of nowhere and that nobody's watching, and say they enjoy raping a teenage boy or a even younger boy, and you have no idea about this. This guy comes off as maybe a Christian, almost, super hardcore right-wing fundamentalist almost.
And a little unbeknownst to most people, he's doing meth with a male prostitute.
Yeah, and trying to and probably filming or not. Well, he's being filmed unbeknownst to him, but he's committing. I guess you could say he would be considered a pedophile because a lot of them have proclivity for young boys, which is disgusting. Mm-hmm. And they use this stuff against them. That's why it's important to understand this stuff, because they blackmail them with this information, and then they use it to control them. It's very easy to control someone when you know that they do that kind of stuff. Can you imagine? I bet you a lot of these guys, their wives don't know any of this stuff, so they don't want them to find out.
No, and their future would be over. Their name would be dirt. They'd be known for who they are. We've reached the historical point in any civilization or empire called the criminalization of the state, where the criminals have achieved positions of power and point the guns of the state at their political enemies and call them criminals. That's where we're at. This is not some extravagant, this could never happen. This is historical. This is what happens to a nation in decline. We are at that point. And there's very little to be done but watch it happen and try to educate each other about what's going on so they can't, extrude their psychopathy too much, limit their damage as much as possible as they fall flat on their own faces.
Thank you, Holland. I appreciate you hanging out for like an extra almost hour after the show to yak with me.
Well, thanks, Popeye. I mean, your show's great, and I really had a good time.